FI to make me chairperson today, yet another time, for our regular Wednesday medical satsang. I call it medical satsang. It's no less than a satsang, sir. And it's my pious duty to introduce our speaker today, Dr. K.K. Talwar. Dr. K.K. Talwar is Padma Bhushan and Dr. B.C. Rai awardee and renowned cardiologist of North India. He is a former chairman of Medical Council of India, former head Department of Cardiology, AIIMS, and former director of PGI-MR, and he is credited with the first implantation of implantable cardioverter defibrillator, ICD. And he has a world record in the Limca Book of World Record, appeared in 1997. His work has been developing cardiac arrhythmia as a society and introduced cardiac resynchronization therapy, CRT. He developed heart failure and heart transplant program at AIIMS and has documented over 240 articles and 270 abstracts which are published and peer-reviewed in medical journals in our country and abroad. And he has, to his credit, 15 chapters to medical books. Sir, cutting short my introduction, I know him when he was working with Max Saket. Now he is a chairman at Cardiac Sciences, PSRI Hospital, Delhi. Over to today's subject of discussion will be heart failure, the recent advances. We have discussed it in many CMEs. Even our last CME was dedicated to heart failure on our International Heart Day. But every speaker has its own specialty, its own way. कहते हैं अंदाजे बयां अलग ही होता है, and Dr. Talwar is a teacher par excellence. Although we have heard on heart failure many times, but I am sure we will have very many new things to learn from him, and we will have question answer after the talk. Over to Dr. K.K. Talwar. Welcome, sir. Welcome to this group. I think it's your first talk on our Zoom meeting with this group. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalra, Dr. Chauhan, and fellow colleagues. Thank you so much for this opportunity. As you rightly said, this topic, I think heart failure is a burning topic. Sorry, is it audible? Is it audible, Dr. Kalra?
Yes, sir. You are audible. I will request everybody to mute so that the disturbances are minimal. Last time there was lot of interference.
So I will also request everyone to mute so that I think there is no kind of a disturbance. Can I share my screen, Dr. Kalra?
Please, sir. Please, sir. Go ahead.
Just... Just give me a minute, I'll just try to... well, I hope the slides are visible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Visible, sir.
I'll share with I realize that this topic is very frequently talked these days, and I think maybe some of it, or maybe most of it, will be repetition. But I'll try to stress upon some areas which I think are helpful to us, particularly in the present stage of heart failure management. Why I think it's important, this is, we know the magnitude of the heart failure. I think they say India's population is around 1.3 billion. And the risk factors which cause heart failure, coronary heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, and even rheumatic valvular disease still with us, heart muscle diseases. So I think if you look at the present estimated prevalence, it is going to be more than 7 million patients. I think probably with us it's going to be more because of our, the high rate of risk factor which cause heart failure. I think there are two subsets of heart failure. One is systolic with reduced reaction fraction, and another is with a preserved reaction fraction or a mild reduced reaction fraction. But I will more concentrate today on my presentation on the reduced reaction fraction.
Bolo.
Well, as far as if we look at the stages of heart failure, as you know, stage A, B, like when I think the only stage C is the one when person comes with symptoms of heart failure. Of course, most the patient comes in stage C to us, and then of course some may be stage D, which we call end stage or refractory heart failure. The evaluation includes, I think, history is very important, and of course the non-invasive evaluation, ECG, X-ray, echo, now cardiac MRI also has become very important, particularly in heart muscle situation, to identify the underlying cause, because that may help you to find the treatable issue. Of course, the biomarkers are helpful in prognostication and invasive investigation like coronary angiography to rule out underlying coronary disease and endomyocardial biopsy in some situation. I'll share with you in the end of my presentation about the utility of this particular procedure. Well, NT-proBNP or BNP, I think we all know the limitation. The main use is in both kind of thing, prognostication, and sometimes when have a dyspnea, you are not sure it's a lung issue or a cardiac issue. I think in those situations it's helpful in the clinical practice to rule out. So I think like somebody has a COVID, has a lung issue, or a shortness of breath, you are not sure how much the cardiac involvement or not. So NT-proBNP, if it is in the normal range, certainly rules out any cardiac kind of issue in that situation. This is one important area where I think we try to use it, of course, for prognostication also. Why I think as far as the therapy of heart failure, I think why we are looking for newer options. Just to highlight you that if you look over the years, last 20 years plus, if you look at the 1 year survival, there is very little kind of benefit. I mean, in spite of since 2000, we have number of drugs that we know improve survival, but you see, as far as the survival from less than 80, maybe around. So I think there's not much, still there is a large number of patients which are not benefited what we have today. So then there is also concern that we should have some newer kind of therapies. Similarly, the mortality at 5 years or 10 years. And so that is, I think, the reason why we are looking for newer options in heart failure. If we look at the therapeutic evaluation or the evolution of the drug, I think earlier we have only for 2 centuries, we only had digitalis and diuretics. And it was only, I think, in 70s when we came to know that vasodilators may be helpful. And when nitrates and isolation and the hydrogen combination was seen to be beneficial. Of course, then we have ACE inhibitors, and that was the importance of neurohormonal agonists, and that's why we use a beta blocker, ACE inhibitor, and mineralocorticoid antagonist. I think this has been now mainstay of therapy since the last 30 years or so. But we still need newer therapies, and I think we'll know in the next decade more about some gene tissue therapies, cell therapies, or molecular revolutions, because as I mentioned, number of patients still we are not able to treat with the help of available medication. Now, if we look at the therapies in heart failure, the drugs which have shown improvement and which main pharmacotherapy for us, ACE inhibitor, ARB, now ARNI. This may, I am sure all you know, this may now replace the ACE or ARBs, and beta blockers, aldosterone receptor antagonists, in some situations hydrogen and nitrates. SGLT2 inhibitors have become another important group of drugs in the last few years. Of course, in some cases, ibuprofen, diuretics continue to be our main strength for decongestion, and in some situations maybe statins. Of course, we also have many devices like IV pacemakers, ICDs, LVAD, and cardiac transplant programs. therapy that we initially start, as you all know, maybe ACE inhibitor first and then go with beta blocker. But I think there's always sometimes which one to start first. I'll say in my practice, if somebody has a sinus tachycardia, rate is more than 90 or 8, so I'll always prefer to start with beta blocker first and then after some few days add the ACE inhibitors. But otherwise, you are normally with ACE inhibitor, then the beta blocker, and all kind of beta blockers, carvedilol, metoprolol, bisoprolol, nebivolol, for elderly particularly have been found to be used. I just want to share with you one observation that we published in 1996 in Journal of Cardiac Failure. That time in the country, carvedilol, metoprolol, bisoprolol were not available, and the carvedilol benefit also for the first time was shown in 96 in the USA carvedilol study. But that year we also published our data on propranolol because that was the only beta blocker available in the country that time, and we used it and in patients with DCM, 56 patients, and published in Journal of Cardiac Failure. Of course, because of its negative inotropic property, this is no more a preferred beta blocker today, and we use the other three ones, whichever maybe personal choice sometimes. Of course, diuretic, I think we all know for congestion we have the number of diuretics, thiazides, we have furosemide, torsemide. Torsemide has a longer duration of action and causes less hypokalemia, so I think we would prefer particularly somebody has slightly high creatinine. Atolazone is another effective one and used in combination when the torsemide or furosemide do not help, particularly in the depressed renal background. We also now know tolvaptan selective T2 receptor antagonist. This is particularly limited to patients for the hypernatremia with heart failure, and where I think you might add particular diuretic. Mineralocorticoids, I just want to emphasize, though this has been shown to be improving the survival, but in our clinical practice, for some reason, the use is less. I'm sure all of you, I don't know in your practice, but I think maybe the reason which I think often physicians or cardiologists are sometimes worried is that may cause hyperkalemia, you are using ACE inhibitors and you are getting MRA, potassium may go up, you have to measure potassium repeatedly. Of gynecomastia in females or males is a issue, particularly amenorrhea. So these are some of the side effects, particularly in the elderly or diabetic, or that be probably the reason one is sort of afraid of using it. But because of its benefit, I think we should try to give the benefits in most of the patients where we can use it. And of course, selecting or epinone in place of aldactone, because this has less side effect, but it is not as potent as spironolactone or aldactone that we have. So inotropsin is supposed in acute situation, particularly in hypertension, in our practice, we always first start with noradrenaline, and if the mean arterial pressure is more than 65, add dobutam into it. But if the pressure is still low in spite of NORAD, so I think we may add adrenaline in addition. Avoid vasopressin as far as possible and use dopamine only in bradycardia. So this is usually we use in situations when there is a hypertension, the patient comes with heart failure or practice of use of inotropes. ARNI, you all know, I just want to emphasize that we knew the neurohormonal limb beta blockers very well, know the benefits, we know the RAS, and this was another RM which is only appreciated in the last few years, that the paradigm heart failure study was published. This is mainly that neprilysin inhibitors, so that natriuretic peptides they don't get degraded, and then they are in, they can cause beneficial effect of diuresis, using the aldosterone decrease, fibrosis decrease, hypertrophy decreases, and sympathetic tone also decreases. So all this leads to a benefit to the patient with heart failure. And this was the study, paradigm heart failure study, where it was shown that mortality benefit, all causes, cardiovascular causes, sudden cardiac death, worsening of heart failure as compared to enalapril, which is the ACE inhibitor which was used in consensus study. So I think this study has, I am sure that soon Army is going to face in practice. The only thing is the cost of this salt, but otherwise this will replace the ACE or ARV in setting of heart failure now. And this is another group of drugs which is SGLT2 inhibitors and empagliflozin, dapagliflozin, both available in the country, others are not. But if you look at all the studies, whether they reduce ejection fraction or failure stable symptoms, but they have shown reduction in the cardiovascular death and reduction in the hospitalization. All these two drugs, and this has now become another important tool of drugs with us for patients in heart failure. And sotagliflozin is another salt, it's SGLT1 and 2 inhibitor. And this also, the study which was unfortunately was terminated prematurely because of the COVID issue, I learned, but there was whatever data is available, again, it was very beneficial, but had some slightly more adverse effects. But we need to have more data for this particular salt. Then there are miscellaneous drugs that we use in practice, and I do want to mention ivabradine, we know may be helpful in some situations, sildenafil, tremetazidine, and these are some other salts. Some of the other, there are no much kind of definitive data available to support the use of these drugs in routine patients with heart failure. Of course, ivabradine, there is certainly a study, SHIFT study, which was published in 2010, and the benefit has been shown to reduce cardiovascular mortality or worsening heart failure, and this should be mainly used in patients with tachycardia after optimal beta blocker. Suppose somebody has a low pressure and you can't upgrade the beta blocker dose. I think in those situations, to control the heart rate, it's a very useful drug and is beneficial. So this is also, I think, the use in clinical practice whenever I think such situations. If you look at what has been our sequence of using the pharmacotherapy, ACE inhibitor or ARB has been the first step, or maybe first time beta blocker. I think you can choose in your practice depending on the clinical status, MRA then, and then go to ARNI. So this has been our sequence of stepping up our pharmacotherapy in a patient with heart failure, what we call conventional sequencing or stepwise. But I think now with the kind of new knowledge that we are having, probably I think the new sequencing may be that you start with beta blocker and SGLT2 inhibitor, because they do not call any fall of blood pressure. So these two can be combined, and then you give the RNA, I think replacing ACE or ARBs, and then of course MRA. So this is the kind of sequence I think which, and this probably in the next 4, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you can upgrade these drugs to give a optimal benefit to the patient, I think with the present evidence-based pharmacotherapy. This is just to show you, I think what we in practice, I will even mention that it's like a personalized state of the heart failure. You will have to see patient heart rate. Depending on the heart rate, we might have to choose the drug. If somebody's heart rate is below 60, we can't use beta blocker. Or even below 70, we will prefer other drugs first. We go for the blood pressure. How much is the blood pressure? Like somebody's pressure is 130, 140. We might start a combination of the beta blocker or MRA and this RV. So I think it all depends on the situation in general. Patient with atrial fibrillation might need some kind of a special therapy. And patient with renal failure, we might have to that we can't use RNA, we can't use ACE inhibitor. I think isolagine or combination of nitrates and hydrogen is a better drug in this group of things. Of course, for congestion, we have to use diuretics, and atrial fibrillation, I think digitalis may have some role in patients to control the rate. So I think we need to go a kind of personalized way depending on the heart rate, pulse, blood pressure, congestion, rhythm, kidney issue, which guides us to choose our drug and do best for our patient. I'll also sort of share that I think we must also look for in a patient reversible causes for heart failure, like excess salt intake, drug compliance is there or not, pulmonary infection, hyperthyroidism, digital toxicity, somebody electrolyte imbalance, anemia. I will come to anemia and atrial fibrillation because the two conditions are common, and of course the smoking issue, control of blood pressure, alcohol issue. So these are some of the excess alcohol. Again, I think we need to. These are some of the reversible factors. If they are there, we should try to address to that. In addition to the pharmacotherapy which I have shared with you. And then treatable conditions, some are that you can cure a patient with heart failure. Somebody has a reversible ischemia, PCI, or if a small disease, bypass surgery might help the LV function. You know, there are some cases which were for transplant, but then coronary artery those showed significant disease, went for bypass, and they were taken out of the transplant list because LV function improved. Tachycardia-induced cardiomyopathy, I think like persistent atrial tachycardia or sometimes ventricular ectopics frequent can also lead to LV dysfunction, and if you sort of take care of that, you can improve the LV. There will be kind of reversible issue. We have published some of these for the embolism, pheochromocytoma, and see again because excess cortical means causes cardiomyopathy, and treating surgery for this may cure a patient of heart failure. Aortic stenosis, where coarctation of the aorta, we have described a patient with heart failure, if you patient may have underlying myocarditis, and if you give immunosuppressive therapy, you can cure these patients, and we publish our data long time back. Of course, LBV, thyrotoxicosis, obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. I think these are some of the situations which may be treatable, and we need to address that. Anemia, you all know, I think they are highly frequently forgotten. It's very common, increases morbidity and mortality. So anybody who has a low hemoglobin, you should do iron study. If there is iron deficiency, you must give iron supplement orally or intravenous. So now we have the preparations, it should be given so that to improve this anemia which will help the patient. Erythropoietin stimulating agents were tested, but because of the thrombotic problems, I think they are not recommended for treatment of anemia in patients with heart failure. Atrial fibrillation, again a common arrhythmia. 25% of heart failure patients may have permanent atrial fibrillation. AF is strong predictors of development of heart failure. It causes functional and mitral annular dilatation, MR, resulting in worsening of heart failure. And so the management of AF in heart failure depends upon hemodynamic instability. Should be treated with urgent cardioversion if somebody is hypotensive. I think you have to cardiovert him. And then we also have to look at giving anticoagulants to them, diuretic therapy, of course. And then I think once you are stabilized, the further treatment depends to control the rate or rhythm. I think rhythm control is better option in these patients. And so some patient, if it's possible, that some stable patient you may take for RFA ablation. But the result outcome of this, I think, also has not very so many patients so recur. And so I think, but some patients, younger people, may be given this kind of an option. So as to the cardioversion, you all know that if you cardiovert after onset of AF after 2 days, then there may be a suspicion of stroke or systemic embolism. So I think first 24 hours you can cardiovert, but beyond that, either do it PE and rule out a clot, or give an anticoagulation for 3 weeks, and then only do the cardioversion. Of course, avoid calcium channel blocker in patients with heart failure in atrial fibrillation because they are a negative anotropic and they can worsen heart failure. Usually, sometimes for AF we use these drugs, so we must not use the drugs in this situation. Of course, then amiodarone and dafitrilide are the best approach for pharmacological cardioversion in a patient who is a very fast rate, acute onset kind of a thing. And then, as I mentioned, rhythm control and the rate control depending on underlying situation. And sometimes, if we are not able, we might have to even do AV node ablation with the pacemaker. This is one option in some situations when you know that the pharmacotherapy is not helping, patient symptoms are not getting reduced. We might have to use these kind of options. So I think most important thing is to optimize the medical therapy. Use evidence-based medicine, which I have shared with you. Those are the drugs we titrate the recommended doses and tolerate doses. This is important. But I think in our situation, many times we don't easily mention those in the books. I think maybe that because our biological system may be a little different. So try to reach to that the blood pressure pulse should be our guide. How much dose of beta blocker or ARNI we can give into these patients. So blood pressure maintenance is important concern, and of course we should also look at drug interaction. And as I mentioned about the negative inotropic properties, calcium blockers, which should not be avoided use. And in CKD, when we can't use ACE inhibitor or ARNI, we should use combination or hydrogen and nitrate isolagen, which is available. Of course, as I mentioned, take care of reversible and treatable conditions. Now, I think we all know that in spite of what we do, these therapies, patients, I think, continue to be, rehospitalization is common, and as far as mortality also is common. So we are still keep on looking for neo drugs. So despite current therapy, heart failure morbidity and mortality remains high. And these are some new drugs that I'd like to share with you, which are yet not available. Particularly, these two selective myocardial myosin activation, omecamtiv mecarbil, and other is soluble guanylate cyclase or vericiguat. These two drugs which have been tested recently, also approved by the FDA. Of course, these two drugs are available for reduced ejection fraction. These were only for studies for preserved ejection fraction. I think then these are two drugs which I think now we have some data. Like this was the omecamtiv study which shows that as far as cardiovascular death or even heart failure, there was a significant benefit with omecamtiv as compared to the placebo. So soon I think we may have this kind of option for our patients who are not getting benefited by other drugs. Same thing is like vericiguat. This is another I mentioned. The hypothesis for this or the main the mechanism is that soluble guanylyl cyclase. I think when they are reduced, you have a decreased cyclic GMP, TGP. Because of this myocardial dysfunction and vesical dysfunction occurs. By this drug, you directly stimulate the soluble guanylyl cyclase, and so TGP, GMP increases, and that helps the sort of heart function. So these are this FDA approves these drugs for high-risk patients with heart failure, and this was the Victoria study which showed a benefit of the primary outcome like cardiovascular death, hospitalization for heart failure was significantly better in patients with this drug as compared to placebo. So I think soon maybe we have these options also for our patients, but these drugs are yet not available with us. Of course, you know all about device therapies. I don't want to, sudden cardiac prevention is ICD, heart failure, CRT or his bundle pacing or LVV pacing. And then we have assisted circulation for acute failure, intra-aortic pump, impeller or ECMO or LVAD devices, kind of a thing. And just briefly just share with you what the present indication for RCD with heart failure. In a person with a low ejection fraction, less than 35%, the patient comes to you, give symptomatic evidence-based therapy for 3 months. If he is not, ejection fraction still stays below 35%, I think then he becomes a candidate. Sorry, this is a slide. One slide is missing. This is a this is a class 1 indication of 3, and this is a in patient with non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, it has become 2A, but in ischemic it is 1A. I'm sorry that slide is probably missing from here, but non-ischemic, which was earlier class 1B, has become class 2A. So I think whenever we also want to replace the generator, look at what is the ejection fraction at that time, and if it is improved, we may avoid. And the non-ischemic mainly is because that we now know that MRI might help you to find out the underlying fibrosis. Patients who have no fibrosis are indicated for do better with ICD than those patients who have no fibrosis. So these are some of the changes which has occurred. So IC implantation in the first 40 days of MI should be avoided. It's a class 3 indication. And if a person is very sick and not a candidate for CRT, bad or transplantation, then also we should avoid because it's waste of resources. And this is just a share that I think this was 94, I think that then 5 that we first implanted these 3 ICDs in the country. These were all secondary prevention studies that time endocardial lead had just come. And of course the CRT also, you know that main indication class 1A is LVV with a prolonged QRS, or LVV within 120 to 150 is class 1B, and patient with non-LVV with a wide QRS, I think again class 2A indication. So these are some of the patients may be benefited, and time will not permit to go to more details, but just if there are questions, will. And we also should know the CRT, there are some responders, some are super responders, some don't respond, around 30% don't respond. And now there is a question that can we try to do something, optimize the pace, or do horizontal pacing in these situations, or LV pacing, which might help in these situations. So I think these are some of the issues as far as the device therapy goes. And I will also like to share with you about this LVAD. And this is, I think, when I was working in Max, I think we initiated this first device in 2015 or so. We have 2 kind of devices, HeartMate, that time 2 was implanted, then HeartMate 3 came and had a good outcome. So I think now the number must have gone. This was our first case. You see, this is the device this is connected to the ventricle on one side and to the aorta on the other side. This is a scan of the patient, and this was a patient, one of our patient, I think, who later on after a few years again was symptomatic and we had to transfer. So that is the cardiac transplant program. So I think we all know that I think 5-year survival is about now 80% plus. So I think that's a good option in patients with end-stage heart failure if the center has the possibility to do the transplant. I like to share with you a few slides on DCM, dilated cardiomyopathy, because that is one entity we really try to not that much address in our practice. More common in younger people, of course elderly also get, because now that we know that some patients, maybe if you study them, do the biopsy, and if somebody has a myocarditis, immunosuppressive therapy may help. If somebody has a viral antigen positive, antiviral therapy may help. These studies are in class 3 phase. Unfortunately, a very few centers in the country do the viral isolation. Of course, and it goes for some kind of a cell therapy or transplant. Now, this is the tool that we use for biopsy. I think we were very regularly doing in AIIMS when I was there. We published our data of 700 plus biopsies in 1995. So it's a very safe procedure. Like this is the right ventricle biopsy, bioptome opening. And what we see that this is one of the histology. That there is a significant inflammation we cell in the myocardium. This is inflammatory myocarditis. And such patients, we also publish our data that they will improve the immunosuppressive therapy in addition to the heart failure therapy as such. So I think we should give this kind of option in young people who come with acute heart failure, which are not coronary issue, and they may benefit from this kind of approach. So what we usually advise and now try to follow, that if somebody has a heart failure which is non-coronary artery disease, wait for 3 months with optimum therapy. If not benefiting, do a biopsy. If there is inflammation and viral antigen, if you have a facility, look for it. If it is so viral positive, standard therapy, and you may attempt antiviral therapy. If the PCR is viral antigen negative, but inflammation, standard therapy plus immunosuppressive therapy may help these patients. And there is significant data on this issue. If it is a no inflammation, that's like a DCM, standard therapy, as we have discussed various options. Of course, if the DCM but has a viral antigen positive, you may consider antiviral also. Now, if we have to summarize for you that our option for the heart failure, of course, the conventional which I mentioned is or RNA, beta blocker, MRA, and then if somebody has a ejection fraction low, QRS less than 130 milliseconds, and ICD class 1 indication ischemic, 2A indication for non-ischemic. If somebody's ejection fraction more than 35%, and I think continue with the symptomatically better, or we might have to look at if QRS is white, CRT, D or P. But if these people are not benefited, then we may think of LVAD and transplant kind of a option. Of course, the DCM group which I have shared with you, normally it is not top in the recommendation, but this is in our setup is not an insignificant group where we should adopt those options and help these patients. Well, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for your patience hearing, and it is just thank you all for your attention again, and look for, I'm again grateful for this opportunity to me. I will be very happy to answer any kind of questions, or also look forward to your comments on this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Kalra.
Thank you, sir. So nice, sir. You gave us so many new things to learn. And just to summarize in 2-3 lines, what I want to say, that heart failure is very important, and the outcome is worse than many of the malignancies which we are so dreadful fearing them. And early diagnosis and proper management is the key to success. So just a few questions about cardiac biopsy. As you said that you have been doing in 1995 also. So what is the site, and is it very say diagnostic? What is the sensitivity of PCR?
You see, Dr. As far as we were quite active when we were developing a heart transplant program in AIIMS that time, and we were doing a regular biopsy for every patient who has a known coronary heart failure. I mean, he has a valvular disease, rheumatic, no coronary disease, coming with failure. We were doing regular biopsy. It's a safe procedure, and it will help us to find out information. As I mentioned, if there is information, then I think we even published that data of 24 patients, which we didn't randomize them, but we showed 16 patients showed very significant improvement. So if you have inflammatory myocarditis, now your question of sensitivity of that. You see, we take 3 to 5 pieces from the heart, and usually when you take 3 to 5 pieces, you are able to detect if there is an inflammation. Any small focal inflammation, if it is there, you're right, we may miss. That's why today we say do a MRI. If there is a suggestion of some inflammation, then do biopsy. The reason being, because sometimes we have seen inflammatory myocarditis like sarcoid, like tubercular. There's 2 patients that we had who were a tubercular myocarditis. So I think these are some of the situations. Amyloid. Sometimes you don't pick up amyloid by your routine testing. So biopsy helps you in that. Of course, studying the PCR, the viral antigen, that I must admit that we had developed that time in AIIMS, this facility too in some cases, but that's still a limitation in the country. But I say if somebody has 3 months therapy and not improving, non-coronary, do a biopsy. If it is a myocarditis, which is there on the biopsy, I think MRI also supports you. Immunosuppressive therapy, in addition to the heart failure therapy, will be helpful in that. And there is a European study, because the time constraint, I didn't present the whole data, but which shows benefit. We also had our own data. So that's what so this is one entity I think which is often omitted when we talk of the heart failure.
Perfect, sir. Sir, before I proceed to other questions, what about our very, very burning topic today in all the channels, the Vardi son of Shah Rukh Khan, involved in substance abuse. So, are these substance abuse in the general, say, younger generation, are likely to cause heart failure early in their future?
As far as the drug abuse issue goes, particularly the acute MI issues in younger people, the commonest cause, because these are called thrombotic episodes. That's one. So these are more commoner, but I think prolonged use of alcohol we know, and sort of may cause cardiomyopathy kind of situation. But these drugs that we sort of most often talked about, the situation of acute MI, and of course one body cardiac infarct, the LV function is going to be disturbed, is going to be a different subgroup than maybe coronary or then maybe ischemic and non-ischemic. It's a different subgroup.
In your algorithm, you have very clearly given how to proceed. So, is there any group of patients where you don't even wait for 3 months of optimum medical therapy and want to give devices to start with? Is there any group based on their ejection fraction or the presentation, whatever be the compelling indication for CRT or whatever other devices?
If a patient has a white QRS, LVB, I think that is one group of patients or threshold of even giving a CRT even before you wait can be there. Because these are subgroup which may be significantly benefited by the CRT therapy.
My last two questions, sir. Just to say, comparison between sildenafil and tadalafil. Sildenafil is very well known to be given for pulmonary hypertension and all. Does tadalafil also help because it has a long action and probably
I think today,
lesser side effects?
Today, tadalafil is more used than sildenafil as far as the right ventricular dysfunction or pulmonary arterial hypertension, where you want to combine it with other drugs. So I think it has probably it is more, I mean, in literature it is now more used than sildenafil. Probably I think the advantage of taking one tablet a day rather than 3 times a day, so compliance is better and supposed to be
long-acting, less side effects.
Yeah.
And my last comment is that there are many medicines which may aggravate or may induce heart failure, like COX-2 inhibitors, some anti-cancer medicine, adriamycin, ketamine, calcium channel blockers, antifungals, and many other products which are being used commonly. So we should be very cautious where we doubt, because we may not be diagnosing heart failure in every patient which is grade 1 or grade 2 of diastolic dysfunction. We may be missing at times. We are not getting everyone getting echo or some other advanced study for the heart failure. So these medicines should be taken with precaution in such patients, and especially in diabetics, those who are taking pioglitazone and other stuff like triazolinone. So we should be careful in using such products, and we should at least rule out whether a person is already having heart failure. Your comment, sir.
This is very right, particularly if you look at the drugs used in oncology. I think most of the drugs, they have a tendency sometimes to affect the heart function. I think it's generally advised that we must do their echo, prop I, or maybe VNP as a precautionary before starting and then on follow-up. You're right that sometimes people are not aware and of facilities. I think those who are on onco drugs, wherever they are, these facilities may be available. But other drugs that sometimes COX, pain-killing drugs, you're right that we need to be cautious. And like we know about an entity we call selenium deficiency. It was in China that they found in a region very common heart failure. And then they found that it was a selenium which was deficient. And once the deficiency was taken care of, that entity disappeared. So we should be always sort of trying to analyze our patients if we don't have the cause to explain it, particularly in the setting of disease.
Over to Dr. Chauhan, sir. He has so many questions, sir. I am feeling...
Chauhan sir is always it's very difficult to answer his questions also.
Sir, I have very simple questions this time. First of all, a wonderful deliberation on heart failure by you, the master of the subject, and we are so proud of you. You put the first ICD device in India, sir. Sir, from the time you started treating heart failure, way back in 1970, till today, the concept has gone a 360 degrees change. Beta blockers were once contraindicated. They are now the drug of choice. Digoxin, which was the drug of choice, is nowhere to be seen, hardly available. You have to ask the chemist to arrange it specifically for you. He will not be able to arrange even after 3 months of follow-up. We have new kids in the block, like MRA, like SGLT2 inhibitors, and now with the great role of SGLT2 inhibitors even in preserved ejection fraction, diastolic failure. My question to you is very simple, sir. Do we start using these agents early in heart failure so that we can delay the probably use of devices? And what is your general impression about the new group of drugs now, sir, that we have? Your comment on that.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's a very important thing that you share. And you remember that in 70s, when I think when you are studying in our MDs or so, if you tell in the examination that heart failure give a beta blocker, I think I'm sure you are seal your fate, you will be failed. And you will be say what you are talking. So you can see how the medicine goes. And I can just share with you how beta blockers came. I had gone for my fellowship in 80 early to Sweden, in Gothenburg. And that group was using beta blocker, metoprolol, for a few years in patients with PCM, and they were doing some studies. So I asked one of them, how did this idea came to you that you should try beta blocker? I was told that in a round, one of the fellow told the chief that, look, sir, this patient has a heart failure, his heart rate is very fast. Why don't we try to give beta blocker? He said, okay, why don't you try? And they found a benefit. So this was in 75, 6 or so, beginning of beta blocker in DCM, but of course we had the first study in 1996 on carbidopa. And that's why when I came back, I thought we should also try, and we tried our study of propranolol because that was available to us in very small dose. You're right, but your last, I think the main emphasis of your question that why don't we use it as a protective, particularly in high risk, I'll say in patients who are in stage B or maybe stage 1, like SGLT2 inhibitor might become in future to prevent kind of thing. Because these are drugs which we are learning more and more, that they may be helpful not only preventing the development of heart failure, development of even from sudden death issue also. So I think you're right, I think we'll have, but of course we have now time has come. Okay, somebody has a diaphragm, we should. And as for sensors, maybe start SGLT2 and then go to MRA and try to get the maximum benefit. I hope, Dr. I will be able to answer your queries if there is.
Sir, you have answered the question, sir. Sir, now we have the onset of devices, and you mentioned also about atrial fibrillation, sir, as one of the precipitating causes of heart failure, and control of heart failure by proper medication. Sir, at what stage do you decide that you have had enough with the medications in atrial fibrillation and now you need to put a device for that, sir?
So I think you must give the optimum time and optimum therapy for at least, I'll say, 8 to 12 weeks before you think of device. Except my threshold of giving a device is low in patients who have a broad QRS or LPV. There one might feel, okay, you can try go earlier, if somebody is not improving or worsening, you can. But otherwise, other devices like ICD as a prophylactic or so these, I think you should wait for, as per the recommendation, for 3 months of optimum medical therapy.
Sir, you mentioned about diuretics. So one of the criticisms of diuretics in the management of heart failure has been that diuretics have never been able to meet the hard clinical endpoints. That means they have never been proved to decrease mortality, morbidity in heart failure. They never increase the quantity of life. They might improve the quality of life. Sir, what about the new diuretics that you mentioned in your talk? Is now their data available? Do we have now evidence that they are impacting mortality also? The diuretics I am talking about, sir.
As far as they really do not tolerate pattern, of course, if you look at like mineralocortical antagonists like Aldactone,
There is some disturbance, sir. No voice.
Dr. Kalra, sir, I cannot hear Dr. K.K. Talwar, sir.
Yeah, that's why. Maybe he is muted.
Can you ask him to unmute?
I will. He is not looking, sir. How to? I don't have his number. Can someone from PSRI do that? Sir, Dr. Talwar? I think there is some connectivity issue, I think.
Dr. Chauhan, sorry, actually am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Yes,
Is
sir.
it audible?
Yeah. Sir, please continue. You are muted.
Kindly unmute yourself, sir. Kindly unmute yourself, sir. Oh, no problem. I'll...
Sir.
Dr. Kalra, sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible, Doctor.
And is Dr. K.K. Talwar on board, sir?
He was.
Yes, I am here, doctor. And
Sir, Dr. Talwar, sir, are you on board? Are you
I am here,
available,
doctor.
sir?
I hope you are listening to me.
Sir, are you on the cruise?
Sir, I am there. I am not at home. My internet connection is giving little
Yeah.
issues.
Dr.
Hello? Hello?
Sir. Dr. Talwar is very much on the cruise. Sir,
All right. I'll just ask my next question, sir. I'll just ask my next question.
ये इतना कनेक्शन का प्रॉब्लम है डॉक्टर
Dr. Kalra, sir, my next question to Professor Talwar is, sir, with the availability of the new drugs that we have, of all the drugs that we have, sir, also touched upon ARNI. I want to know from sir, what is his order of preference using in heart failure? Does he start using ARNI early, or he waits at least for NYHA 3 and 4 to start ARNI?
Okay, as far as presently, I first do start with ACE inhibitor unless the body blood pressure is very normal, a little high. I try small dose of ACE inhibitor. If it tolerates, then shift on to ARNI. But if somebody's pressure is good, like 120, 130, I may start from the beginning. But if the pressure is lower side, I first try to small dose of ARNI, the ACE inhibitor. I hope it's audible, sir.
Yeah, it's audible, sir. So, as we understand from your talk, sir, the agents that we have for heart failure that are available are the traditional diuretics. Number 1, beta blockers. If you are using ARNI, obviously you will have to take away beta blockers. Number 3, if you are using ARNI, you have to take away ACE and ARBs. Otherwise, ACE and ARBs are also a pillar of treatment of heart failure. Now, if I am using MRA, if I am using diuretic, if I am using a ARNI, sir, what stage do you start using an SGLT2 inhibitor? Especially with the data that we have now for preserved ejection fraction heart failure with SGLT2 inhibitors, sir.
Sir, I think SGLT2 inhibitor we should start early because it has no effect on the blood pressure. I think so. Frankly, now we are. As I even mentioned in my one of our slides, that new option maybe start beta blocker and SGLT2 together in the beginning before you go to ARNI or ACE inhibitor. So I think SGLT2, because of their no bad effect on the blood pressure, if the kidney issue is not a restriction, we should try to use it as early as possible.
Right, sir. Sir, I would...
Dr. Chauhan, I want to come here.
Sir,
just want to say, sir, just to improve the question. Sir, if there is a volume overload documented, then I think diuretic should be number one. And if tachycardia is documented, then beta blocker should be our first choice. And if BP is low, then we have to choose amongst this minor and those who are not affecting blood pressure. I want Dr. Talwar's opinion on this. What is the preference given to them?
Sir, as far as you're very right, congestion, diuretics are mainly for congestion.
Yeah.
They are the drugs which do not improve survival.
Yeah.
So I think diuretics is a must for every patient who has got congestion, whether pulmonary congestion or right side congestion. That's
right.
one. Second, as far as then the other group of if somebody has a heart rate more than 90, as I mentioned, I always prefer to use beta blocker first, and then go to ACE or to ARNI. Because that is once we find that beta blocker are tolerated, blood pressure is stable, you can go to reasonable dose, then you add either ACE inhibitor or ARNI depending upon the situation. And then third you go to MRA. But SGLT2 inhibitor, I think though earlier we were thinking to start in the end, but maybe you can start in the beginning because it has no bad effects, it's also mildly diuretic, and it has no effect on the blood pressure, it has no effect on the pulse rate.
So we agree, sir, SGLT2 can be a starter for almost everyone unless it is contraindicated.
That's fine.
Dr. Kalra sir, with your permission, I will ask my last question to Professor Talwar sir.
Sure,
sir. What is the role of Digitalis in your clinical practice today, sir?
Sir, Digitalis I use in patients who have atrial fibrillation and we are not able to control the rate with beta blocker because of the pressure issue. We have to then add Digitalis in those situations, number one. And number two, I think somebody has a gross right side dysfunction, maybe another group of patients that you might sometimes add sword to. But atrial fibrillation, it not getting controlled with beta blockers alone, I think Digitalis becomes a useful drug.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Talwar sir, it's always an honor and privilege to listen to you, sir. Extremely grateful to you for doing it on our forum. I give it to Dr. Kalra sir.
Sir, no doubt, sir, it was one of the memorable CMEs. And my last comment or question, whatever you can call it, if a person is diabetic, I think that SGLT2 will be our first choice. If a person is non-diabetic, then you can keep it a number 1, 2, whatever is your tailor-made, whatever as per your need. And sir, I wish we have more such satsang with you in near future. It was wonderful, and I leave it to my group. If they have any questions, please ask.